The boy had a pair of clairvoyant eyes. He could see the demons wandering among humans. His reactions to these demonic threats were often dismissed as insanity by others. The sensation of being engulfed by fear was so overwhelming that he could hardly breathe. Finally, at the age of 18, the boy chose to end his own life. On the way to the hospital, his soul descended into hell. In those brief 2 minutes in hell, it felt as though the boy had lived an entire lifetime. When he returned to the world, he transformed into a man whom even Satan coveted, John Constantine. On this day, the chubby priest had another job for him. An Asian mother, while caring for her sick daughter, experienced something strange. Her once weak daughter was now suspended from the ceiling in a twisted spider-like pose. The mother then called the chubby priest, who, upon hearing the urgency, immediately summoned Constantine. Upon arriving at the scene, the world's most powerful exorcist assessed the situation. Constantine casually placed his cigarette on a cabinet and walked to the window. He yanked down the curtains, and under the sunlight, the demon possessing the girl began to struggle. Once he found a design he liked,
"This is Constantine, asshole."
As Constantine pressed the ritual tool to the girl's forehead, her body immediately began to emit smoke. She then started to thrash violently, but within just a few seconds, the girl quieted down. This was clearly unusual. The demon's mark on the girl's body did not disappear, and the cigarette had only burned down a fifth of its length. Constantine bent over to sense the demon's movements within the girl's body. To completely deal with the demon inside the girl, Constantine instructed the bystanders to find a mirror. Then he cut the telephone line on the wall. He smashed a window with a chair, pushed the girl underneath it, and threaded the telephone line through the metal bars outside the window. At Constantine's command, they secured the mirror with the telephone line. With the demon's howls echoing, the handsome guy holding the mirror curiously opened his eyes just for a moment. But that brief glance caused his life to rapidly drain away. When Constantine removed his hand, the demon's figure was already reflected in the mirror. Provoked by Constantine, the demon became instantly enraged. At Constantine's signal, the priest began to pull the mirror with all his strength. With the mirror shattering, the demon was sent back to hell, and the marks on the girl's face quickly disappeared. She soon returned to normal, and the cigarette burned out at just the right moment. The exorcism was successful. Constantine, with a flourish, turned and left. His dedication to exorcism was partly an attempt to atone for his past. After all, someone who has committed suicide is destined to go to hell, and Constantine had already experienced hell's grandeur. He had no desire to revisit that place, so he hoped to gain God's forgiveness through his exorcisms, hoping to secure a place in heaven after his death. But his current situation was dire. Since he could remember, Constantine had always had a cigarette in his mouth, consuming 3 packs a day, which had severely deteriorated his health. CT scans showed he was in the final stages of lung cancer. The doctor told him he had little time left. Unfazed by the doctor's words, Constantine lit another cigarette. After bidding farewell to the doctor, Constantine went to the church where the Archangel Gabriel resided, hoping Gabriel could extend his life by a few years so he could earn enough merit. There, Constantine encountered a strange woman. Although Constantine arrived first, she insisted on arriving before him. The woman's name was Angela. Her uncharacteristic behavior was due to an urgent matter. Last night, Angela had been jolted awake from her sleep. Her twin sister, Annie, had also awakened from her bed in a psychiatric hospital. Annie then left her room, climbed to the hospital rooftop alone, and after removing her identification bracelet, jumped from the roof. Due to their twin connection, Angela felt a strong sense of foreboding. It wasn't long before Angela received a call from the police. Seeing her lifeless sister, she was heartbroken. However, upon hearing that Annie had died by suicide, Angela refused to believe it. Determined to save her sister from hell's punishment, she went to the church, hoping the priest could give her sister a Catholic funeral to spare her from eternal damnation. But the priest was powerless to help. In Catholicism, suicide is an unforgivable sin. Constantine faced a similar rejection. Gabriel was unwilling to expend divine power to extend Constantine's life. Constantine, in turn, was unapologetic.
Why? I don't even understand that. One who should go to hell, half-breed.
After leaving the church, Constantine went to find Jax, who had been providing him with ritual tools. With the few days he had left, Constantine needed to accelerate his exorcism efforts. He also sensed something unusual in Gabriel's attitude, so he had to arm himself thoroughly. Jax brought him several bottles of holy water and a dragon's breath gun. After testing them, Constantine was quite satisfied. Meanwhile, Angela was still upset about the church's stance. After returning home, she began to analyze the video footage of her sister before the jump, hoping to find clues that Annie had not died by suicide. After repeated viewings, she discovered something intriguing. Before her sister jumped, she muttered a name, Constantine. This immediately reminded Angela of the man she had met at the church, whose name was also Constantine. Determined, Angela decided to find him. At that moment, Constantine was suffering from the pain of his illness. Violent coughing made it hard for him to stand upright. As he coughed, various insects and pests appeared around him.
Hey buddy, got a light?
A monstrous entity made of countless sewer cockroaches attacked Constantine. This was likely another trick by the demons. Having barely managed to come to the human world, the demons had yet to wreak any havoc and were quickly sent back to hell by Constantine. Thus, he had become a thorn in the demon's side. After dealing with the trouble, Constantine decided he needed a partner. The situation was getting out of hand. Demons that usually avoided him were now openly challenging him. Soon, Constantine arrived at a bar frequented by half angels and half demons. The owner of the bar was a powerful sorcerer capable of single-handedly confronting 30 demons. People referred to him as Midnight. Midnight was precisely the ally Constantine sought. However, Midnight was a traditionalist who maintained neutrality between angels and demons. As long as these entities didn't disrupt the balance, he wouldn't interfere. Therefore, when faced with Constantine's request, Midnight flatly refused. As soon as Constantine returned home, Angela, desperate to save her sister, showed up at his door. She told Constantine about her sister's ordeal, hoping he could offer help. But with Constantine's own life hanging by a thread, he had little inclination to help her prove her sister's cause of death.
It wasn't a suicide. My sister was a devout Catholic.
Would go straight to hell, where she'd be ripped apart over and over in screaming, brutal agony.
Although Constantine's words were accurate, they cut deeply into Angela's heart. Just as Angela was storming out, a powerful tremor shook the room, followed by a strong smell of demons. Clearly, the demons were not targeting Constantine, but were headed for Angela. Constantine sprang into action. He caught up with Angela and explained, "God and Satan have made a wager. The stakes are human souls. Neither will intervene personally, but will only exert minor influences. The one who collects the most souls wins." Angela was skeptical of Constantine's claim. As a police chief, she was not easily swayed. Just as she was about to mock Constantine, the streetlights began to flicker out one by one. Sensing that the demons were closing in, Constantine quickly led Angela towards the only remaining light source. But the statue of the Virgin Mary clearly wouldn't provide adequate protection. Constantine pulled out a relic of a saint. Witnessing this firsthand, Angela couldn't help but believe Constantine's earlier words. Constantine was also intrigued by the girl. What kind of person could attract so many demons? He decided to help Angela uncover the truth behind her sister's death. Of course, his method involved a personal trip to hell to check if Annie's soul was there. After arriving at Angela's home, Constantine instructed her to heat up a pot of water. He then took Annie's pet cat and with one firm step, plunged his large boot into the pot. He told Angela to wait outside and began to project his soul out of his body, returning to hell. Inside, the place still appeared as decayed and desolate as ever. The flesh-eating demons, upon detecting Constantine's presence, began to stir restlessly. As Constantine had anticipated, Annie's soul was indeed in hell, confirming that she had died by suicide. Annie had removed her wristband, preparing to descend to the next level of torment. Meanwhile, Constantine was surrounded by a swarm of flesh-eating demons. As Annie fell deeper into hell, Constantine leaped up, grabbing the wristband while simultaneously shattering the holy water he held. A gust of wind blew through, and Angela, waiting outside, seemed to sense something. When she pushed open the door, she saw Constantine surrounded by white smoke, as if he was on fire. Hell truly was a place one should not visit. Constantine informed Angela of his findings. Annie had indeed committed suicide. However, upon seeing Annie's appearance, Constantine realized that the situation was not as straightforward as it seemed. He contacted the priest and asked him to use spiritual methods to investigate if anything significant had occurred in Annie's life before her death. After receiving Constantine's request, the priest went to the morgue. Among the hundreds of bodies, he located Annie. He placed one hand on Annie's chest and held her arm with the other, beginning his spiritual investigation. However, he was unprepared for the intense demonic aura attached to Annie, which immediately backfired onto him. The priest pulled out a bottle of whiskey, hoping the strong liquor would suppress the demonic energy within him. But strangely, despite the bottle being full, not a single drop would pour out. Desperate, the priest fled the morgue and headed straight for a nearby convenience store. Once there, he opened the store's liquor cabinet and tried to pour from the bottles, but the liquor still wouldn't come out. Not giving up, the priest even smashed the bottles and tried to drink directly from them, but still, no liquor would flow. Realizing that he was doomed, the priest decided to leave some clues for Constantine. He grabbed a corkscrew and plunged it into his palm. As the priest struggled, a well-dressed man appeared in the convenience store. He was a half-demon living in the human world, while the store clerk was a half-angel. They did not intervene, but merely watched the situation unfold. Back at Constantine's place, he was still waiting for news. However, Angela soon received a call from her subordinate officer. When they arrived at the scene, they found the priest in the midst of reincarnation. Seeing the priest's decaying hand, Constantine immediately understood it was a clue left for him. After making a rubbing of the priest's palm blood on a piece of paper, an unusual pattern appeared. Constantine quickly contacted B-Man, an expert in this area. After consulting the entire Bible, B-Man identified the pattern as representing Mammon, the son of Satan. According to the Bible, Mammon refused to adhere to the rules set by his father and God and sought to establish his own kingdom in the human world. Over the years, Mammon had been working tirelessly to break the seals placed by God and Satan. Just as B-Man was about to reveal crucial information, the machines behind him suddenly activated. In an instant, B-Man realized he had touched something he shouldn't have. Briefly bidding farewell to Constantine, B-Man prepared for death. Constantine, sensing that B-Man might be in danger, hurried to his location. B-Man's premonition proved correct. His eyes began to itch, and a fly emerged from his eye socket. By the time Constantine and Angela arrived, half of B-Man's body had already transformed into flies. The loss of his friends deeply affected Constantine. Seeing him despondent, Angela revealed a secret. Both she and her sister had psychic abilities. Her sister's suicide was also caused by this ability. To prevent being influenced by it, Angela had forced herself to forget her abilities over time, reducing them to almost nothing. If she could regain her ability, she could continue the investigation. Therefore, Constantine decided to perform a ritual to help Angela recover her lost power. After filling the bathtub in the room with water, Constantine made an unusual request.
So do I have to take the rest of my clothes off, or can I leave them on?
Oh, that's fine.
Angela's response indicated her disappointment, but the atmosphere was clearly not suitable for such concerns. What Constantine needed to do was use the water to shut off all of Angela's senses, allowing her to try using her ability to sense the outside world. As time passed, Angela, struggling for breath, began to thrash wildly. Just as she was on the brink of drowning, time seemed to freeze for a moment. The next second, Angela's abilities returned completely. The seemingly sturdy bathtub was shattered into pieces by their combined efforts. With her psychic abilities, Angela immediately went to the location where B-Man had died. She sensed that someone had been there before and found a coin that had been left behind. As soon as Constantine saw the coin, he knew who had killed Beemon. It was Malzahar, a half-demon living in the human world. Constantine sprang into action, taking Angela with him to Malzahar's hideout. He equipped Angela with a protective amulet.
I'm coming with you.
You're staying in the car.
At that moment, Malzahar was admiring his handsome face in the mirror. However, something was off about the mirror today. It wasn't until Constantine sprinkled holy water on his face that the human skin attached to him began to rot. Angela, waiting in the car, couldn't hold back any longer. She pulled out her handgun and walked inside. To prepare for the fight, Angela took off her jacket, inadvertently leaving the protective amulet Constantine had given her in the car. However, Constantine was not playing fair. He took out a book of exorcism and began to interrogate Malzahar. How does Mammon plan to break the seal? Constantine chanted an incantation. As the spell took effect, Malzahar felt his soul being torn apart. At this point, he finally believed that Constantine had the power to exorcise him. To save his life, Malzahar revealed Mammon's plan. Mammon had acquired the Spear of Longinus. The divine blood on it would allow him to be born into a human body. By finding a soul powerful enough to contain him and then using the Spear of Longinus to expel him, Mammon could bypass the seal and enter the human world. Meanwhile, in the outskirts of Mexico, a man found the Spear of Destiny. When he grasped the spear, its divine power shielded him completely. When a car speeding at 120 miles per hour hit him, it was as if it had collided with a concrete pillar. He would also quickly deliver the artifact to Mammon's host. When Angela arrived upstairs, Constantine had already obtained the answers he needed. However, Malzahar's next words made both of them feel a deep sense of dread.
She was my only mission. You brought her right to us.
They could no longer afford to stay. They needed to intercept the Spear of Longinus before Mammon did. As they waited for the elevator, a steel door behind Angela suddenly exploded. A mysterious force enveloped her and rapidly propelled her to an unknown location. Seeing this, Constantine rushed after her. Finding the Spear of Longinus was now the most urgent task. Even if Mammon possessed Angela, he couldn't break the seal without it. The only person who could help now was Midnight Old Man. Thus, Constantine returned to Midnight's bar. Given Midnight's previous attitude, Constantine decided to take a more forceful approach this time. Seeing that threats wouldn't work, Constantine had to back down. Moved by Constantine's sincerity, Midnight agreed to help. He took Constantine to his storage room, which contained an electric chair used to execute countless criminals. Following Midnight's instructions, Constantine removed his shoes and sat in the electric chair. Midnight then poured some water on the floor and inserted the wires into the chair. After a powerful jolt of electricity, Constantine sensed the presence of the Spear of Longinus. The Mexican man who had acquired the spear had already brought it to the hospital where Annie had committed suicide. Fortunately, Midnight intervened in time to pull Constantine back. To prepare for the upcoming battle, Constantine began to make preparations. They melted down metal sacred objects and fashioned them into bullets, inscribing exorcism runes onto them. A batch of superpowered exorcism weapons was thus completed. Meanwhile, the Mexican man controlled by Mammon was approaching Angela. The bullets from Angela's gun had no effect on him. Soon, Angela was subdued by the man. At this critical moment, Constantine arrived with his apprentice. After giving his apprentice a few instructions, the two went their separate ways. The apprentice found the hospital's water tank, then used a gun to create a large hole. He then stuffed the pre-prepared holy relics into the tank, transforming the water into holy water. Meanwhile, Constantine had located the gathering place of the half-demons. Pronouncing their guilt, Constantine dragged over a chair and stood on it. As the demons looked on in confusion, Constantine used a lighter to ignite the hospital's sprinkler system. As the sprinklers activated, holy water began to shower the room. When the holy water touched the half-demons, their skin began to visibly rot, emitting green smoke and causing the demons to scream in agony. After dispatching the last demon, the master and apprentice rushed to find Angela. By the time they arrived, the Mexican man who had been possessed by Mammon had already perished, but Constantine was too late. Mammon had already possessed Angela's body. Also, furious, Constantine wanted nothing more than to strangle Mammon himself. The master and apprentice then worked together to pull Angela out. Once Angela was restrained, Constantine immediately began reciting an exorcism incantation. As his deep voice echoed through the room, Mammon began to lose his resistance. Angela briefly regained her senses, but it was short-lived. She soon felt intense agitation in her body, followed by severe pain in her abdomen as Mammon's demonic face violently battered against her belly, threatening to burst out at any moment. In this critical moment, Constantine held Mammon's head down with one hand while continuing to chant. Finally, under the combined power of Constantine's and his apprentice's incantations, the restless Mammon began to quiet down. Just when it seemed they could finally catch their breath, a mysterious force suddenly lifted the apprentice into the air, slamming him against the ceiling and floor repeatedly. Furious at this turn of events, Constantine decided to go all out, ignoring his own physical condition. The summoning was successful, but the visitor was none other than the old nemesis, Gabriel. Instead of aiding Constantine, Gabriel had come to assist Mammon. With human faith dwindling, Gabriel knew she would be blamed for the decline in belief, as she was an angel dedicated to spreading faith. Therefore, she decided to help Mammon come to Earth. Once Mammon had wreaked havoc on humanity, Gabriel would step in to save them, hoping to regain a surge of faith from the people. Determined to let Constantine witness Mammon's arrival firsthand, Gabriel gently exhaled, and Constantine felt as if he had been hit by a freight train. Resigned, Constantine looked up at the sky, hoping for a miracle from God. It was the first time he had ever asked for divine intervention, but, as always, God remained cold and unresponsive. Feeling disheartened but not defeated, Constantine decided to seek out someone who might actually help. Picking up a shard of glass, he swiftly cut open his own wrist. The rapid loss of blood caused Constantine, already weakened, to grow faint. Gabriel had already drawn the spear of Longinus. With a single thrust, she could pierce Angela's body and allow Mammon to break free from his confinement. As Constantine's soul began to slip away, time itself seemed to freeze. At that critical moment, the man who had been eagerly awaiting his chance finally arrived. Lucifer, also known as Satan. A being who could rival God in power, Lucifer had come personally to greet Constantine's soul. He offered Constantine the highest honor, making him the only mortal Lucifer would deign to light his cigarette. In his weakened state, Constantine felt like a child who had lost a fight and was now facing his parents. He revealed to Satan everything about Mammon's plan to break the rules he had set with Gabriel's help. Satan was surprised by his son's audacity, but he recognized it as fitting of his lineage. After instructing Constantine to wait, Satan moved to the adjacent room. Under his immense power, time remained frozen until he had successfully removed Angela from beneath the spear. Only then did time resume its normal flow. Upon seeing Satan, Gabriel's legs felt weak, but she quickly regained her composure. They were of the same rank as angels. She shouldn't be far inferior to Lucifer. After completing his tasks, Satan approached Constantine. Seeing that Satan was in a good mood, Constantine made one final request. He wished to exchange his own soul for Angela's freedom. Satan agreed to Constantine's request without hesitation. He whistled as he dragged Constantine, preparing to return to hell. However, as he continued, he felt increasing resistance, as if an invisible force was hindering his movements. A ray of holy light descended, and Satan immediately understood what was happening. It was all part of Constantine's plan. Once Satan had agreed to use his soul to secure Angela's freedom, Constantine had completed his part of the bargain. According to the wager between Satan and God, this round was a minor victory for God. After giving Satan a gesture of dismissal, Constantine prepared to board the train to heaven. But Satan, unwilling to let Constantine leave, grabbed him. If Satan couldn't have him, then no one would. After a brief search, Satan extracted all the cancer from Constantine's body. As long as Constantine lived, Satan wouldn't consider himself defeated. When Constantine awoke, he found himself in perfect health. Under Satan's mighty hand, Mammon was sent back to hell, and Angela returned to normal. Gabriel, now stripped of her wings, had been reduced to a mere mortal. Unable to accept this fate, she sought Constantine's help to return her to heaven. She feared suicide would only lead her back to Satan. However, her scheming was too obvious, and Constantine wasn't about to make it easy for her. Instead, he landed a punch on her face, allowing the once exalted Gabriel to experience the pain of a mortal. Constantine handed the spear of Longinus to Angela. With her spiritual abilities, hiding it would be a piece of cake. From then on, Constantine continued his role as an exorcist, walking the earth to save those ensnared by demonic forces. And this mission would go on for a long time.
The man took off his clothes and tied himself to the iron bed. He then took a vial of blue potion and injected it directly into his artery. As the potion continued to flow in, he began to feel extremely uncomfortable. The tingling sensation throughout his body made him twitch constantly. Then the man's skin began to split. His companions became nervous, but there was nothing they could do to help. In a short time, the man's blood vessels and organs were gradually exposed. In the blink of an eye, he was reduced to a pile of bones. Eventually, the man disappeared completely from the hospital bed, but there was still a mark on the bed. It turned out that the man did not die, but became a transparent person. He had developed the blue potion, and in the constantly shaking iron cage in front of him, it was his masterpiece. Only through a thermal imaging device could the transparent body inside be seen. Not long ago, he also invented a restoration potion. By injecting it into the test subject, the transparent gorilla could be restored to its original form. Everyone was very pleased with the success of the project. They went to negotiate with the military and planned to complete the project, but they were refused. In order to change the military's attitude, Jack decided to perform the experiment on himself, which led to the opening scene. But no one knew that since the experiment was successful, Jack's true nature had begun to reveal itself. When no one was looking, he would deliberately tease his female colleagues. When he was on duty at night, he would secretly open the door to the surveillance room. When he saw Lucy sleeping in the chair, he would deliberately play some little tricks. He suddenly woke Lucy up, and Lucy saw the change in her clothes and immediately felt very uncomfortable. Lucy suspected it was Jack, but when she checked the monitor, Jack immediately went back to bed. The next day, Lucy told everyone what had happened the night before. She also asked everyone what they would most like to do if they had the power to become invisible. Still, everyone refused to believe what Lucy said. However, it was at this time that Nicole, who was going to the bathroom, was affected. As she was about to sit down, she saw movement in the urinal next to her. She quickly put on her thermal imager and looked around. Who knew if Jack was behind her? Jack still wasn't satisfied. He decided to flirt with his ex-girlfriend, Jenny. While Jenny was doing the experiment, he took Jenny's coke right away. Jenny didn't care. Then Jack lifted Jenny's hair. This move completely annoyed Jenny. She put on her clothes and left the lab. Fortunately, this experiment wouldn't last long. After 3 days, everyone would take out the restoration potion and plan to restore Jack. As the orange potion slowly poured in, Jack's heart began to appear, followed by his windpipe and bones. But suddenly, Jack's body began to struggle and eventually returned to the invisible state. It seems that the restoration potion has no effect on humans. But in order to prevent Jack from doing whatever he wants, everyone came up with a wonderful way. The man put a plastic tube in Jack's mouth and poured all the rubber on Jack's body. Jack's head immediately popped out. Jenny used a scalpel to make an incision in the mouth and then cut 2 holes in the eyes with scissors. Looking at the ugly skin, everyone smiled with satisfaction. But Jack was not happy at all, because this way he completely lost his freedom. He would be locked in the lab all day. And since the restoration failed, the side effects of the drug became more and more obvious. Even with the help of his colleagues, Jack couldn't help but vomit transparent liquid. In just a few days, Jack suffered a double blow, both physically and mentally. He really couldn't stand this kind of life, which was worse than death, so he left the lab without permission. The security guard in the parking lot saw Jack acting suspiciously and went up to check it out. Jack calmly closed the top of the car and drove straight out. The feeling of regaining freedom was really great, and Jack was happy all the way. And at a certain traffic light intersection, he encountered two children who were laughing at him. When the children's mother reacted, Jack immediately drove away. When he returned home, he saw a beautiful woman taking a shower in the building across the street, and an idea came to him. Soon Jenny arrived at Jack's house. She saw the skin suit that Jack had taken off and immediately realized that something was wrong. At that time, Jack also saw Jenny through the window. However, he didn't panic at all, but calmly went to the bathroom to wash his face. In order to catch Jack, his colleagues were each equipped with a gun, but suddenly Jack appeared and explained that he had just gone home to get something. Jenny said she didn't see Jack when she returned home.
I'm still project leader. It's my decision.
So that's it, huh?
After tasting the sweetness, Jack planned to take revenge on everyone by using the invisibility feature. He first inserted the pre-recorded video into the infrared monitor and then came down the stairs to Jenny's window. But what he never expected was that his good buddy had actually fallen in love with his ex-girlfriend. In a fit of rage, Jack smashed the glass, ruining their good time. Tony immediately sneaked up to the window to check, but only heard the sound of someone walking down the stairs and didn't see anyone. Seeing this, Jenny seemed to have an answer in her heart. She quickly called her colleagues, but after they checked the monitor, they insisted that Jack had never left the lab. By this time, Jack had already returned here, but as soon as he thought about the scene just now, he became more and more angry. In the end, he dragged the transparent dog directly into the cage and hit the sides of the cage hard. By the time Jenny got here, she noticed that the monitor had been switched by Jack. She suddenly felt that something was wrong, so she went to her supervisor's house for the night and told him about Jack's invisibility. But just as the two were discussing how to deal with Jack, Jack quietly arrived at the door. As soon as Jenny left, Jack took the opportunity before the superior reported the situation, secretly unplugged the phone line, and then pushed the supervisor into the pool. The wife upstairs heard the noise and ran down to investigate, only to find that her husband was already dead. By the next morning, Jenny had received word that the supervisor had drowned. She knew it was all Jack's fault, so she told everyone to leave quickly. But when they started the elevator, they found that the elevator password had been changed by Jack, and everyone was trapped in the lab. Jack also started a crazy revenge plan. First, he targeted Nicole. When the other party put on the thermovision goggles, he suddenly appeared in front of Nicole and killed her directly. Then he targeted Lucy. While the people were separated, he suddenly closed the door and trapped Lucy inside. The woman spilled all the blood bags on the floor, then pointed the gun in the air and swore. But after swearing for a while, there was no reaction at all, and the woman just relaxed her vigilance.
Quite a mess.
Please.
You know.
After a moment, Jenny entered the walk-in freezer and found Lucy tragically dead in the corner. While his colleague Larry was holding a fire extinguisher and constantly looking for Jack, Jack suddenly attacked from behind and ran right through Larry's body. Tony saw this and rushed over to check, but unexpectedly Jack made a sneak attack and stabbed Tony. Seeing this, Jenny immediately pulled out the iron rod. But before they could escape, the door of the cold storage room suddenly closed, and the temperature was also set to -40 degrees by Jack. The whole cold storage room became very cold. No matter how much Jenny resisted, it was no use. Helpless, she had to bandage Tony's wound and then look for another way out. What they didn't know was that Jack had changed his costume and decided to blow up the lab with a bomb. She wants to kill everyone who knows the transparent secret so that he can do whatever he wants in the world. At this moment, Jenny is on the verge of despair, and Tony's breathing is getting weaker and weaker. At this critical moment, Jenny had a sudden inspiration. She wrapped the wire around the doorknob to make a simple magnetic attraction device. Then she connected the wire and pulled hard on the position of the doorknob, which finally opened the door of the cold storage room. Once the crisis was resolved, she quickly rescued Tony and built a fire to keep him warm. At the same time, Jack had already arrived in the elevator. Just as Jack was about to leave, Jenny suddenly appeared in front of him holding a spray gun. Jack's body immediately burst into flames and his mouth kept screaming. He quickly stood up and continued to tear off his clothes. Jenny ran after Jack, close behind him. But at this critical moment, the spray gun was running out of gas. But in the blink of an eye, Jack disappeared in front of her again. Seeing this, Jenny immediately activated the fire extinguisher above and carefully searched for Jack's figure. At the critical moment, Tony appeared in time to knock Jack down with a stick. But just as they were about to leave, Jack suddenly picked up the iron rod and rushed at them. Jack was electrocuted and Jenny and Tony were lucky enough to escape. But as soon as they arrived at the lab, they found that the bomb had started the countdown. They immediately ran to the elevator entrance. Then there was a loud explosion, and the lab instantly burst into a sea of fire. The elevator box was also blown away by the aftershock of the explosion. The two of them saw this and quickly crawled sideways on the ladder, and only then did they escape by luck. But as soon as they caught their breath, the elevator box fell with great speed. The two who survived the disaster continued to climb. Suddenly, Jenny found herself being pulled down. It turned out that Jack was not dead. Even after experiencing high-voltage electricity and violent explosions, he was not dead at all. He desperately pulled at Jenny's body, finally pulling her to the top of the elevator. But Jack went to all this trouble just to ask his ex-girlfriend for one last kiss. Although Jenny seemed to agree, her eyes were on the rope next to her. While Jack was intoxicated, she quietly reached for the cable and stepped on the mechanism with all her might.